everyone. Welcome back to the 424th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have an amazing show for you today. I'm recording live in Dallas from the Parks Associates Connections Smart Home Conference. I may not have gotten those all in order, but we're going to talk about some of the things I've learned so far. Then we're going to talk about the 5th year anniversary of GDPR, Samsung's new Knox Matrix security vision, Microsoft's Build is happening this week, and their Fabric is actually worth talking about for industrial and enterprise IoT clients. Plus, we've got some updates from Yeelight and Yale and Govee about Matter, and a Kickstarter. We're bringing it back like it's, 2014. It's a smart outlet. We're also going to hear from our sponsor, Computex, and our guest this week is Paul Williams, who is the head of NICE North America. They're the company that owns the Abode brand, 2GIG, Elon, a lot. And we're talking about Matter, generative AI in the smart home, and the economy. So, boatloads of fun.
Heavy topics.
I know. We'll hear all of this and more. But first, a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Blues Wireless. Blues provides cellular products that work, so developers can build IoT products that change the world. Blues is founded by industry pioneer Ray Ozzie and provides the hardware and services to link virtually any device to a global cellular network. You can get started today with Blues Note Card. It is the easiest way for developers to add secure, robust, and affordable prepaid cellular to their microcontrollers. With just a few lines of code, anything you build can be cloud connection. Learn more at blues.io. Alrighty.
You're back in your hometown?
My hometown? No, my hometown is Houston. I'm in Dallas. It's a big state.
I thought you were in Austin. You are in Dallas.
Yeah, I was born in Houston, lived in Austin, but I'm visiting Dallas.
I did not know you were born in Houston. I learn something new every day.
Yeah, Houston, that's Blessed Swamp is my home city. Yeah, it's a special place. Actually, there's some really cool things and great food. And yeah, I don't mind Houston. I hated it growing up. But that is not anything to do with the Internet of Things. So let's talk about Dallas. Parks Associates, couple things. Their research firm, it was actually kind of lovely. Elizabeth Parks, who is the CEO and daughter of the founder of Parks, Elizabeth Parks, she did this lovely tribute to her mom, and they started this company in like 1980. Oh, crikey. Was it 85 or 87? I don't remember. But this woman started this firm because she was like, oh, you know what? Computing is going to change how we live. And then added on to it, broadband and the internet is going to change how we live. And keep going. And it was just really kind of cool. They had this like slideshow that talked about like who was who in the smart home all the way back in like the late 90s. And I recall as far back as like 2002 going to visit IBM's like R&D offices and seeing their smart home plan, which involved a lot of RFID codes. I'm just going to be honest. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. Sure, it'll happen. And here we are 20 years later. And
she was right.
Yeah. And also very different. And also does not work, which was kind of what I was worried about. So I'm going to do a lot more in the newsletter. There'll be a little bit more coherency in the newsletter. But the big topic here, probably at Parks, one is Matter. And kind of a sense of disappointment reigns supreme about Matter, unless you're like somebody who helped build Matter. And then you're like a little defensive and, you know, it'll happen. It's going to take time. And then generative AI and what the heck this is going to mean for the industry, which, I mean, I feel like everybody's having that conversation. So in the smart home, when it comes to generative AI, the big conversation is, hey, what will this enable? And most people are thinking along the lines of a better smart home assistant or a better virtual assistant in the home being able to, I'm going to say intuit, but it's obviously not intuiting, but take in a lot of information and then program your automations is basically how I would think about it.
Yeah. Actually, we talked about that last week because Google Assistant really wasn't mentioned at Google I/O. It was all AI.
That was one part, and that's great. We've kind of talked about that. And, you know, eliminating the coding from like programming your house. I'm thinking like Madam A had the hunches thing. That was kind of an initial first step there. obviously not built with a large language model. But then the next thing that we talked about, and I was really grateful for it, was the privacy implications of generative AI, which is you're going to be looking at a lot of this data. It's going to be coming in, and will customers worry whether or not their home gets fed into these and that could leak somehow? Their daily habits could somehow leak through these large language models if they're being used to train it and then be used to infer things about them that they might not want inferred about them. People are obviously a little unclear on how all that would work, but it is a concern, and I was glad to see people thinking about it. So, yeah.
You and I actually talked about that offline, off the show, about when I was writing that post about Google AI and the assistant, and you mentioned privacy and training. And my thought was, it's totally valid concern, yes. But I'm thinking and hoping that the models, which can be small enough to run locally, can be trained locally, or the training can be supplemented with my data so that stays within the home. That's my hope.
So that is such a great segue, Kevin, because that was the other kind of, I guess one of the other takeaways was local is finally relevant again, not just for generative AI, but just because privacy is becoming so relevant. Like a lot of people pushed back on buying smart home devices. It's the third reason people don't buy smart home devices. Number one is they don't understand the value of the device, which, Number two is it's expensive. And number three is they're worried about surveillance or privacy issues. That means privacy is the big reason, but also because it is more energy efficient and people are looking at like cutting down cloud costs. So what they're talking about, especially with regards to training, is a hybrid strategy where you have locally, you've got a model, it's running, you deliver your insights to the cloud, or you're going to run as much as you can locally, like automations and things like that, and then just check in with the cloud to get updates or cloud relevant information. And so this, to me, makes sense. This is like, hey, we have two options here. We have a cloud and we have local. What runs best here? What are the trade-offs? So I'm glad we're finally really talking about that, and it's not like weirding people out. So, yay.
That's good.
The other thing, I really was excited to hear this was actually from a gentleman from Calyx, which is a modem and router company. They long ago sponsored the show, but he was like, hey, it feels like trust is actually going to become really important. Who are the trusted providers here? And I heard a lot of other people talk about trust here as well. So this concept of privacy finally seems to be hitting home, and also trust is like, hey, you're going to do what you say you're going to do when you do it, especially in security. There's a lot of security folks here. So especially on the security front, we're talking about like using video analytics to reduce false positives. But, what if it wasn't a false positive and there was someone sneaking into your house? You need to be sure in those kind of situations. And that's an element of trust. But they were talking about, well, dude, if this is going to be a service, which everybody wants it to be, then you've got SLAs, so service level agreements. You just write that into your service level agreements, which this makes a ton of sense. But I also think that means we will see a delay in a lot of these services that we're excited about, especially with big things like elder care monitoring, maybe energy management. Like those are things you want your algorithms that are managing that to be like super good.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that consumers have a way to check, I'll call it the status or results of those SLAs somehow. I mean, I know they may not all be numeric type things, but
if they don't perform, I mean, you could say, yeah, you get one false positive. But if someone murders me in my bed, I mean, that would be, who cares if you're paying $10 a month and you get a refund if you've been murdered in your bed. But
yeah, that would be the last false positive you ever saw. Yeah.
And the service provider, maybe it's an Amazon, maybe it's a telco. Like, I don't know if the service provider is going to be the smaller companies making the hardware. That's the other thing. No one said this, but I took this way. God, get out of hardware. If you don't have like some service on top of your hardware or something that people will pay you for, just run for the hills.
Yeah, get out of it completely like Peloton did, because now they just announced all new digital plans and that's their focus. It's not about the hardware at all.
Yeah, which is kind of, I mean, I really thought we would have hardware and really cool hardware that was designed to an app. Like with the exercise app, I thought we'd get like, actually, there's a connected Pilates machine for like $3,000, which you're like, holy cow, Stacey, that's way too much. But I have a non-connected Pilates reformer that I bought, and it was like $25,000. Not 25, sorry, $2,500.
Right.
I mean, it's more, but not much more. And like it has the sensors on it to really detect how these things work. And I really thought that was the future, but I was wrong.
I don't think you were completely wrong. I think some of the products that have led the forefront of hardware plus services didn't really, I don't want to say, they didn't really offer that much more than a non-connected piece of hardware that does something similar and maybe a complementary device like a smartwatch, for example. Like my wife did not buy a Peloton. We spent $500 on a much less expensive exercise bike. No, there's no sensors, but she pays $12 a month for the Peloton digital services and has everything on her Apple Watch. So it's not a compelling reason to spend $3,000 for the hardware and then pay the $12 a month or whatever it is.
That's true. Yeah, if you're going to do a hardware play, you got to wrap that cost up into a subscription. So maybe you can do it for a cheaper device, but not like the Whoop Band is a good example. That is, they have a wearable that you can't buy on its own. It's just a subscription plan. So anyway, all right. The other thing I will say is at this event, there are lots of smart home people. Smart Things is here. I'm not going to list a bunch of people that we all talk about, know and love are here, but Amazon and Google are not.
Yeah. Well,
that kind of has me wondering, like, what's going on there? And that was a big question everyone else has. Everyone's like, Amazon and Google, their smart home divisions seem to be floundering a bit. And, many people mention the fact that Matt O'May division in Amazon was set to lose $10 billion over the next year, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, notable. So they're like, is that still a thing? Amazon assures us all that is still very much a thing. And we are seeing rationalization on that front already with like the death of Halo, which thank God. The lack of things like their Amazon Care Together service plan, like being pushed forward with all the devices that I thought it would have. Like we are seeing some retrenchment.
Yeah, but they haven't disappeared by any means. I mean, just last week they introduced 2 new Echo devices, and Google's doing its thing, mostly on the software side right now with the Google Home updates. I'm assuming Apple is not there because Apple doesn't attend many of these types of things. But interestingly, they haven't cut much of anything, and they're still moving forward with everything. So,
you know what? One of the most popular stories I ever filed in my career was a photo of an Apple booth it was a cloud event that I was at. I was like, holy mackerel.
Yeah, that's rare.
Apple is here.
That's rare.
And that was essentially the post. So much traffic because everyone was like, what, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah. Okay. And then the other final thing that I've seen here so far is the economy is a big topic and it is starting to scare people. Our guest, Paul Williams, is going to talk about this, but a big reason people buy smart home devices or sign up for security services or new broadband or whatever is because they've moved. You buy a new house and you buy a bunch of stuff to go in it and make it smart. And that's not happening. People aren't moving. New housing starts are down. Paul Williams will talk a little bit about where the ups are, but this is coming up quite a bit. And I'm like, buckle down, y'all.
Yeah.
No, it's hunker down. Hunker down, y'all.
Hunker down. Hunker down. I think we'll see very quickly, like within the next week or two, what we should expect economy-wise in the next 6 to 12 months, because the U.S. debt issue is going to be resolved or not. And then we'll see what happens with interest rates here, because in the U.S., those are the big drivers, and that's also filtering out through the global economy. So we'll have to see.
Indeed. All right. So, Kevin, just curious. It is the 5th anniversary of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that the EU created.
I didn't get you a card. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll survive. Would that card say, hey, this card has cookies? It better have cookies. I love cookies.
Well, it'll give you the option of having cookies or not.
Excellent. So when you think of GDPR, do you think, yay, success, or what do you think?
Well, I have and as would you to a point, I mean, we probably have slightly different viewpoints on this, but as an American, it really hasn't affected me at all, other than as an independent web publisher for my other site. I had to enable certain pop-ups and cookie approvals for people visiting that site from the EU. I'd be curious what somebody in the EU actually thinks, if it's really helped. I don't think it's hurt consumers there.
Generally, when I ask people about GDPR, they love citing it as a failure when we talk about things like privacy regulation. They're like, oh, look at like GDPR. It didn't do anything except make those annoying pop-ups at the bottom of your website when you go to a website.
But it gives you control of those cookies.
Well, it does. It gives you control of the cookies, but many people are like, ugh, I don't care. But it also actually has helped. So it gives you control of your data, which was the point. In the EU, if you're a citizen of the EU, even if you live in the US, you can do several things with your data, such as see what information a company has on you. You can ask them to delete it. You can ask them to correct it. You could do quite a bit there. And people are like, well, it didn't really solve anything. But just this week, Meta, formerly known as Facebook, they've been ordered to suspend their Facebook EU data flows, and they were hit with a $1.2 billion privacy fine.
Ouch.
On top of a huge investigation that they had done. Amazon actually was fined $887 million for misusing customers' data for ad targeting in 2021. And so basically, it is doing something. You just don't necessarily see it. And, people in the EU may not be like super thrilled, but it's something. And those are not insignificant fines.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, and when I was implementing, what I needed to for GDPR on my site, I used a VPN and visited my site from EU countries, IP addresses of EU countries. And I mean, I saw not just the controls, obviously, but I did dig around to see what is it that I'm capturing, because I try to be very transparent and capture as little as possible for my readers and to my readers. And there were some things in there that I'm like, I don't want or need this data, and I did make some tweaks on my side a couple of years back to reduce that. So I would think it's a good thing. And I'm glad to hear that even though people may not think it is over in the EU, there have been benefits. I'm curious, and I don't think we have an answer to this, but I'd like to see somebody do some IoT analysis to see what smart home data from the EU, where it's going, because that's got to be looked at too, not just internet browsing, which is where you mostly see GDPR.
Yeah, we cared about it because it does affect smart home data. Internet browsing is a little easier to access and see what you have.
Yep.
A lot of the companies in the EU who are doing smart home products, they're actually bringing them over to the US now with those same kind of privacy learnings intact.
Good.
Yeah, which I'm all for. The challenge is those devices tend to cost more. They tend to cost more because a lot of the stuff is done locally, right? And so you need your hardware is more expensive because you need a beefier processor inside to deal with that. And then they also can't offset their costs with the cost of hosting cloud services. When it does go to the cloud, they can't offset that with data sales. So instead, they charge you like a subscription fee. And American consumers were kind of like, we don't read privacy there. We read, I don't want to pay for this. I bought it.
Exactly. Yeah. We all want our privacy, but we don't want to pay for it.
Yeah. Privacy is still a luxury, and vendors know this very well.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Let's talk about security. So it's like privacy's kissing cousin. So Samsung Knox. Why don't you tell us what the heck this is?
So for those who are not familiar, Samsung Knox is Samsung's, I'll call it, security service that they introduced in 2013. Anybody who has a Samsung Galaxy phone that runs Android has probably seen Knox on there, because I believe they all come with it now. Originally, it was just certain phones as they rolled it out, a decade ago. But it's basically like their way to protect your device from malware or connecting to things that shouldn't be connecting to, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in October of this past year, Samsung had a very vague press release about Knox Matrix, and it just had a lot of buzzwords and said, stay tuned. Well, apparently we had to stay tuned till this week, because now they have a Samsung newsroom press release about Knox Matrix, talking about Knox, but also their vision for the new Knox Matrix, which is very interesting for two reasons. One, it's no longer Knox for phones and tablets. It's Knox for devices connected in an ecosystem. So they mentioned televisions, refrigerators, vacuum cleaners. So it's IoT as well. The way they talk about protecting these devices is very much like how Matter works. Basically, they're creating trusted networks between the Knox matrix protected devices. And if one of the devices or one element is compromised, Knox matrix will isolate it from the ecosystem to protect all the other devices. And they're using blockchain to validate software security updates, looking for issues, security problems, and whatnot. Again, it seems a lot like Matter.
Yeah, this sounds exactly like Matter because they have the different fabrics that you join. And if you're in the fabric, you're in the fabric and you're friendly and you've done your device attestation, which is handled on the blockchain. So yeah, this seems very similar to Matter, but this incorporates things that are not currently part of Matter, like refrigerators and televisions. Oh no, televisions are part of Matter.
Well, Samsung is known for doing their own thing, which is very similar to what other people do. I mean, a lot of their vision, design, etc., user interfaces come directly from Apple, or they're Apple inspired, I should say. They're not like lifting it exactly, but you get what I'm saying.
I do.
To be honest, they're making a big to-do about this today, and what they're saying is that they're going to start with Samsung Galaxy products such as smartphones and tablets with Knox Matrix in 2024. And then they're going to expand that to their home appliances in the next 2 to 3 years, followed by partnered devices. So there's a whole initiative here that's long-term that, again, seems like a rehash of Matter's security, but they're doing what they usually do, moving forward parallel with something else that's going on in the industry.
And I don't blame them because Matter may not succeed. Or it may only be big in certain countries, and Samsung has a global brand. And I mean, more security is not terrible unless it makes it very difficult for things. Like Apple, in the name of security, does things that sometimes makes it very difficult to have devices from another ecosystem work with your Apple ecosystem.
Yes.
And
so does Samsung, because a lot of their stuff is Galaxy-based only. A Galaxy smartphone running Android is not the same as a non-Samsung smartphone running Android when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. All right. We'll see if it's a unifier or a disunifier. No, what's that called? What is it called when you don't unify? You divide. A unifier or a divider?
Maybe.
All right. Speaking of unified. Yeah, that was so not subtle. But speaking of unified, a Microsoft build, probably the big news there for the folks who care about industrial or enterprise IoT, this is not for the smart home people, Microsoft introduced Microsoft Fabric. And this is one of those big, awesome Microsoft announcements where they're like, we shall boil the ocean and it will be amazing. And it does actually sound pretty cool. So what they're doing is they're bringing in all of their data storage and analytics stuff and creating something called OneLake. This is going to be a data lake. And if you don't know what a data lake is, because you're like a normal human being, it's basically with enterprises, they get a lot of data from all over their operations and they shove it in one place, one cloud, and they call it a data lake. And the issue is when you have a data lake, you have no freaking idea what's in it and how it's formatted. And it can be hard to pull out data and use it in new ways, which with industrial IoT, you really want to do. So what it's doing is combining new versions of Power BI and Azure Data Factory to let you pull all that data into a single data analytics dashboard. And all that data on that dashboard is going to come from the data lake. The other thing that's really compelling here is not only can you get a way to see all of your data a little bit more easily in one place as opposed to going to Power BI or Data Factory or someplace else, you will be able to pull in data from other clouds. So Fabric and OneLake are going to be compatible. OneLake will be able to access data in AWS's S3 cloud storage service, which is cool.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, just so you know, a lot of your device data and stuff, if you're using AWS to host devices and you're trying to access state and that sort of information, that's usually actually done in Lambda. It's a serverless function. So it's not going to be in S3. So this is for longer term data. This isn't for immediate data, just to set expectations. And Microsoft also plans to add support for Google Storage at some point in time later. So the next thing I would like for them to add, though, is because one of the ideas is you'll be able to share data across partners. This is relevant for IoT when you're trying to automate your supply chain. You actually need to access data from your partners on an ongoing basis as you're trying to see inventory, right? Microsoft didn't go into this, but this is the company that bought you Active Directory. So I'm pretty sure they're going to have ways to safeguard access to that data so you only get it at the right time. And this kind of heralds way back to this idea of data contracts that I had, and not just me, other people had back in the day for managing. Because when you connect things, the more you connect, the greater the value. But a lot of this data is competitive. And so to see it, you really need to have things in place contractually to say, okay, you can access only this level of data, only during this time, right? Or you can't access it a month after you need it. You can only access it during the time that you need it. So this is really big. And I think it's part of a final movement to really start integrating more of the information that we're gathering from our connected world. So yay, Microsoft.
I would hope and I believe that they could control that type of access through integrations and APIs. I mean, technically, it shouldn't be impossible. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it shouldn't be impossible. So I think there's a good chance you could see what you just described.
Yeah, I mean, it's on their radar. It has to be on their radar because it's such a concern to big kind of industrial clients and enterprise clients. But yeah, the question is how easy will it be and how will they charge for this? And by the way, we don't know how they're going to charge for one link access and all the things running on top of it. So, all right, let's do a quick Matter update. Things that are getting Matter. Yeelight, which is, I see their stuff all the time. They do cheap nanoleaf style lights. They do light bulbs. They do lots of stuff. They are upgrading their Yeelight Pro Bridge with Matter compatibility. So, yay.
Nice.
Yeah. Govee also has a new Matter light that works for people. So, yay on that. And then Yale. Kevin, you want to tell us about Yale? It's not what we're hoping for.
No, not exactly. It's close. Yale has finally released its Yale Assure Lock SL with Matter. So it's the same Assure Lock SL that they have available today with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but it's bundled with the Matter radio module. You don't even have to plug it in. It comes with it. It's already in there. It starts at $229.99. I believe it's available in 2 different colors. So that's good for people who have just held off because they're like, I could buy the Assure Lock now and then later buy the $80 module. Well, if you waited, now you can get it all in one package. For those waiting for the module, you're still waiting. Yale said basically we're targeting the early adopters of Matter. So we're holding off on selling that module separately.
Yeah.
Boo.
So, boo. And I might note that we had multiple reports of people with the Yale Assure Lock version of it suddenly shutting down and them not being able to access their homes. So I'm a little nervous now about installing that. I am in the market for a new lock, so I'm like, ooh, what am I going to do? Okay. And then here's just a quick Kickstarter update. I know. It's like, what year is it? It's still 2023.
Kickstarter's still a thing in my world, so.
I mean, it is. It's just, it's been a while since, we used to have regular Kickstarter features, like smart home stuff. I bought my first Smart Things system on Kickstarter back in 2012. I think I backed it, or 2013.
Probably a Pebble.
Oh, yeah, I did back a Pebble. Okay, yeah. Okay. This is the Invis Outlet. And this is a device from a company called Intecular. And it's a sensing cover plate for a smart outlet. So you got to install the outlet. It's met its goal. They wanted to raise $10,000, which obviously is not enough to produce the product, but they far surpassed it. They raised almost $73,000. It's an in-wall smart outlet. The cover plate has both a nightlight on it. It works with Matter. And then it's got a sensor that tracks air quality, presence, brightness, and it has that nightlight. So it's actually kind of compelling. And
it's smart because aside from just having the outlet and the basics of, connectivity to the outlet to say, is it on, is it off? There are smarts in the cover plate and sensors as well. That makes it a little pricey though, because they're planning a price of $129. They have a launch special now that's good for another 29 days. $75 for one of these Outlet Pros, which is the outlet and the cover.
And it's worth noting, all those sensors, not all of them are Matter supported yet. So even though you have Matter support, you may not get the Matter support that you want for, like, air quality's bad, turn on an air purifier. Although it will, if your purifier is plugged into this, it'll act just like that Aware Glow I used to love so much and turn it on itself with its own software. Yeah, this is neat. It's expensive.
It would have been neater to me if they could use regular outlets and just make everything in the smart cover and get power from the outlet and have control over the outlet that way. But
that would be magic.
That would be magic, yes.
Side note, the presence sensor is a millimeter wave sensor, so that's going to work all the time and be very sensitive. Although I imagine it's going to track your pets as well. So your pets will get your hallway light on too when they're wandering around. Okay. What a feature. All right. I think that concludes this segment of the podcast, but now it is time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline. That is the segment of the show where we hear from you. That's right. If you call us and ask us a question, we will endeavor to answer it. We'll also enter you to win this month's prize, which is a Nanoleaf Triangles Starter Kit. Woo! And the IoT Podcast Hotline is sponsored by Particle. Looking to fast-track your IoT project? Particle is offering free dev kits to new users. So if you're located in the US or Canada, you should visit particle.io to get your free dev kit today. And Particle provides, cellular connectivity. They provide a board that has your controllers and whatnot on it, and cellular or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connectivity. They're cool. Oh, I don't think I told you the number. You should call us at 512-623-7424. And our question this week is from Michael, who is, he's not sure he wants to go whole hog on Matter just yet. I don't blame you, Michael.
No.
Here's his question.
Hi, it's Michael from Cleveland, Tennessee again. I deeply appreciate the recommendation for the Nano Eve bulb, but hearing more about the state of Matter, I'm really inclined to just stay with Zigbee, because I still have a crap ton of Zigbee devices that I'm going to have to continue supporting for the foreseeable future anyway. So, not to double dip, but if you could recommend a really good Zigbee bulb, tunable white, or RGBW, either one that's reasonably priced and reliable, that would be deeply appreciated. Love the show. Thanks.
So I sort of get why he isn't wanting to go all in on Matter yet. He's heard some issues, challenges. We've written about them. We've shared our experiences. And he already has a bunch of other Zigbee stuff. So presumably he's got to have some kind of hub.
Yeah, Michael didn't tell us anything about a hub, but you cannot just have naked Zigbee in your house because it doesn't work with your phone. So you've got some sort of hub. Several of the Amazon Echoes have Zigbee radios in them, so it might be one of those. A lot of Zigbee, though, Zigbee's a little fussy, for lack of a better word. Zigbee has different profiles, so not every Zigbee device will work with every other Zigbee device. I know. So most Zigbee devices, if you're going to buy a light bulb, if you have like Amazon, you're going to want to look and see if you need a hub. Most of them will require a hub to get all the features. You can always buy the light bulb and be like, oh, can I get the features I want without buying the hub? Using your existing hub. But if you don't, then you've got to go back and buy the hub. But I hate to do this. I'm really happy with my Hue lights. Hue they use a version of Zigbee on their bridges. They're freaking expensive, but the lights are amazing. They're rock solid. I've had these lights in my home. I brought them with me for 10 years, and they're still working. And that is unusual. I've talked to people about the life cycle of lights, and they think it's about 8 years. Sure. But the GE lighting folks, actually, it was the GE lighting folks. They're like, yeah, it's about 8 years. But I've still got my 10-year-old Hues, and they're working. And so I would say to you, it's expensive, but it's good.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, I was not sold on Philips Hue for many years, and Stacy wore me down, and I made the switch, and now I'm adding more Philips Hue bulbs all the time. I do have a Hue bridge because that converts the Zigbee to a proprietary RF frequency for the bulbs to talk to the bridge and or each other, whatever. But yeah, so if you just want basic white lights, you can get a 4-pack of Philips Hue Zigbee bulbs for $50.
But you need the hub.
but you need the hub. Yeah, which, one hub, I believe, supports 50 devices.
It does. It supports 50 devices. And so a slightly cheaper option is Senglid. And they have some Zigbee bulbs. I mean, you're going to find a lot of Zigbee bulbs. I've used the Senglid bulbs. They're good. They're consistent. The quality of light is good. So those are options. But then I just wanted to throw this out at you. I know you're into Zigbee, but what about Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
So the benefit of Zigbee over Wi-Fi is if your internet goes down, the Zigbee controls for your hub are still local, right? So that your lights will still work if you've got like physical buttons. And obviously you can't talk to Madam A because that will be offline. But if you have like a physical button or automation that's programmed in the hub, again, not through Madam A, so in the Zigbee hub, then your automations will still work if like your internet goes out. So that's why you would do something like that. But I don't know how often that happens for you. And Wi-Fi is good. So Wi-Fi may be a good way to go because those bulbs are cheaper. And then you get the forward compatibility with Matter with some devices.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And from a Wi-Fi bulb perspective, they're everywhere.
Yeah, there's bunches. I mean, I've used the GE Syncs. What else have I used?
They have good quality light. I mean, with Wi-Fi, you're looking for quality light and things that don't fall off your network a lot is kind of the way I think about it. Okay, so hopefully that helps you, Michael, and keep on keeping on. And I also love just being like, oh, Kevin's listening to me. He's now listened to me on Hue and Lutron, and he hasn't regretted it. Let's not bring up all the things that I've recommended that you do regret, though, Kevin. Please. Okay. That concludes that segment. Remember, if you want to call us and be entered to win, you can reach us at 512-623-7424. And we're approaching the end of the month, so get that in for if you want to be entered to win May's prize of the Nanoleaf Triangles Starter Kit. Okay, that concludes that segment of the show, but please stay tuned for our guest, Paul Williams, the head of NICE North America. We're going to be talking about generative AI in the smart home, Matter, and the economy. But first, a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Computex. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Computex, and I have with me Tessa Lin, who is the Marketing and PR Manager at Computex. Tessa, welcome back to the show.
Stacy, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So from what I can gather, Computex is one of the largest and most influential tech conferences in the world, held annually since 1981. For this year, what's the theme and what's new?
Computex 2023's theme is Together We Create. It will be a record-breaking year, bringing together over 1,000 exhibitors from 23 countries from May 30th to June 2nd in Taipei. We are excited to have industry titans keynote the conference addressing hot themes such as HPC, artificial intelligence applications, next-gen connectivity, hyperreality, innovations and startups, and sustainability.
Please tell me more about these keynotes.
Sure, Jensen Huang, the brilliant CEO behind NVIDIA and a prominent figure in generative AI, will give the opening keynote at Computex in person. Plus, Qualcomm is set to reveal a new era of intelligent computing and will be joined by some notable ecosystem partners who are all working together to supercharge the future of the PC experience.
And are there any more?
Yes, NXP will deliver a keynote on shaping ecosystems to master complexity and share their vision for the future of semiconductor solutions. They'll also discuss how a perfect blend of technologies like edge processing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, safety, security, and interoperability can help take things to the next level. That's not all. Supermicro's CEO Charles Liang will discuss the future of AI through green computing. He'll be accompanied by a partner to demonstrate how their latest innovations are driving IT growth and revolutionizing data center infrastructures and accelerated computing. Taiwan-founded Acer will also join our amazing set of keynotes.
Sounds exciting. Where can our listeners go to learn more?
So please visit www.computextaipei.com.tw/StacyOnIoT to learn more about Computex 2023. All sessions will also be live streaming on our YouTube channel and in video on demand afterwards if you can't attend in person.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Paul Williams, the Chief Product Officer at NICE North America. Hello, Paul. How are you today?
Hi, Stacey. I'm doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to be on the show again.
I am super happy to have you. Just so y'all know, we are recording here. My gosh, I guess it's not live because I'm going to edit this, but we are live in person at the Parks Connection event here in Dallas. So apologies for any weird sounding noises. First off, Paul, why don't you introduce yourself, your company, and talk about some of the brands, because people may not be familiar with NICE North America, but they're definitely familiar with some of your brands.
Fantastic. Once again, my name's Paul Williams. I'm the Chief Product Officer at NICE North America, as you mentioned. And my background, I've spent the last 20 plus years in the smart home space, most recently with NICE North America, previously with Savant and GE Lighting, and then previous to that with Control4. So I've been at it quite a long time. And so NICE is a company based in Ordezzo, Italy, just north of Venice. But people may not be as familiar with it in North America. So NICE has a great brand name recognition throughout Europe. They build garage door operators, gate operators, and also blinds and shades automated motors. And so been at it for quite a long time, since 1993. This is our 30-year anniversary for the company. Most recently, NICE purchased Nortec Control out of Carlsbad. And Nortec has brands like Elan, 2GIG, Linear, and also Proficient and Speakercraft. So some Panamax, Furman, bunch of brands that are there. So it should be well known by your readership, and your listenership, I should say, of these brands that have been out there for a long time. So great brands. We are going through a process of taking some of those brands and moving them over to the NICE brand over the next couple of years here, so that we can put a lot more emphasis between having people understand who NICE is and understanding.
And y'all are predominantly a systems integrator play, but you do have one or two DIY brands, yes?
We do. And so in North America, we have two brands that are really DIY brands. One is Abode, and Abode is a DIY security play. Has that kind of light smart home experience that goes along with it at the same time too. And then we also have Mighty Mule, and Mighty Mule is a DIY gate solution. Very popular in the Southwest for ranches and farms, where you can go into a Tractor Supply or a Home Depot, purchase one of our gate control systems and put it in yourself and automate your gates.
We actually get a lot of questions about automating gates, so never knock it. Not that you would. Okay. So first off, I figure we should talk about Matter, because it is a big deal in the smart home space. I don't know actually what it's like for these system integrators, if that is even on their radar or they care about it yet. But can you just give me your 2 cents on where we are with Matter today?
Yeah, you bet. It's interesting. You hear a lot of news about it, and we go across a panacea of spectrum here. On one end of that spectrum, it's going to solve world hunger, and it will solve every problem that anybody's ever had with technology that's ever existed. It's going to solve that. That's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's not going to do anything more than we can already do today. I think it's somewhere in between there. And the reason for that, I've spent a lot of time looking at it, but spent a lot of time understanding where that's at today. I will cut to the chase and just say it's got a long way to go, I think, before it gets to a place where a custom integrator would consider it, or it would matter, or it should be, say, relevant to them, not matter, so that Matter would be relevant to what they're doing today. And the reason I say that is that our system and what we have, so we have the Elan system that exists that'll be converting over to the NICE brand later this year. We can already integrate all of these products together. All of the smart home products that are in the home, we can already integrate those. They already communicate. And so the primary focus of that Matter is to make this communication layer so that these devices can then all communicate together. But really the magic and the magic sauce is then what do you do once they can communicate? How do you now bring these unique opportunities and use cases to bear for the consumer so it becomes a value? Otherwise, all I've done is just made them talk together, but that's not the magic. The magic is in what do I do once they're connected together? And that's where people like us that are developing platforms for that can take that communication that ties it all together, and then add that next layer of I would say, really value to the consumer that's there too.
I would think that there are a couple of ways to look at this, but as a systems integrator, I would look at having some base level of standardization as a good thing, because then it really allows you to focus on the programming aspect of it that like helps consumers. Like, I may not know what I think a movie night should look like, but I would hire someone and they'd be like, yeah, let me show you how to work all this out. So it turns them into less of a hardware reseller and more of a consultant, it would feel like. But I don't know if that's really the value of a CEDIA guy or not.
Yeah, CEDIA folks are moving themselves into that way of thinking, which is more service oriented. But they tend to think of themselves as two parts of their business. There's the money they make off of selling the hardware, which is still a big part of their businesses. And then there's the service part of their business as well. And they are concerned about both of those aspects. If you talk to the typical CEDIA dealer that's out there selling and installing systems today. And so I agree. And definitely part of that is if these devices can communicate simply and easily, then I think it's a good thing. The way that I look at Matter for us as a developer or as a developer of a platform is if that becomes an easier on-ramp for those products to get into my ecosystem, for me to be able to add the magic on top of it, then I think that has value. And so I look at that as not having to spend engineering resources to get that connection, which I do today. Once again, we can communicate to all these devices. But if I don't have to have an engineering team that's focused on that integration to develop drivers or communication protocols for those devices, then that certainly will be a benefit. And that's what I see the value and where I see the value going for Matter. But I think we've got a ways to go still. And it really comes into the degree of controllability and also the ability for us to get information from those devices once they're on the Matter platform to be able to then to take that information and then add value to it, to the platform.
And today, I mean, it's been out 6 months. I feel we've played around with it. It's a little rough. How would you rate where Matter is today? Again, 6 months in, first release out. So is this where you thought it would be?
Honestly, I thought we'd be further ahead. And when we got to the first release here and when we got to that 1.1 spec, I thought we'd be a little further ahead of where it's at today. I'm a little disappointed with where it's at. I mean, they've spent a lot of time working on this and I still think it's a little far off. If I were to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put it at a 3 or 4, to be quite honest with you. I just don't think that it's delivering on the promise of this really simple environment where these devices can all intercommunicate very easily and simply. They're easy to set up, easy to manage, easy to then get the value out of that. And I still don't see that yet. When will we know? Well, we'll know when people start to adopt it and people start asking for it. And that's the other part of this dynamic that I think is going to have to, for the average consumer though, to care about this. It's going to require a lot of marketing dollars. And I'm still not sure who's going to belly up for that. Is it going to be Amazon, Google, Apple? Who's going to spend the billions of dollars necessary to educate the consumer market about the fact, because let's be honest, the smart home market, all the way from DIY to pro, has told the story about how these things already intercommunicate together. So that has already been a story. You can make all these things work together. It's a big part of Alexa's story. It's a big part of Google Assistant story. These things all work together under this. So now you've got to tell the consumer a story that says, forget what you were told. They actually don't communicate very easily, but we have a new thing that's going to make it work better, and it's called Matter. And that is going to require a lot of education. It's going to happen through marketing, and someone's going to have to spend a lot of money in order for the average consumer to understand what's at. And I've yet to see where those dollars are coming from.
Got it. Okay. Let's move to a different topic. So Matter was so last year. Now we're all focused on generative AI. So, we've heard everything from like, oh, it's going to kill Madame A and Google's businesses, which don't think is actually true, but sure. And we've probably all tried out like Stable Diffusion or making our own images. Are you using any sort of generative AI today in any of your products, or where do you see them going?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And you cannot open up a browser, a social media app without seeing something bombarding you with AI. And once again, I hate to use the spectrum again, but, as you mentioned, it's going to solve world hunger. It's going to cause the demise of humans. I think that AI has a lot to offer. And I think generative AI has a lot to offer. We have within our product categories today, we actually have Intellivision is one of the companies that's owned under our brand, and they've done a lot of work in AI around camera AI and visual AI, looking at camera technologies. And so we've got some really sophisticated systems there. We're using it today in all of our cameras to be able to do person detection, vehicle detection, be able to then action some event that occurs because those things were detected. We're using it on our touchscreens and our Alarm product to be able to personalize that home. So you can think about this home, and you walk in, it's got a touchscreen on the wall. When I walk up to it, I get my own menu because it's my likes, my favorites that are up there. Stacy walks up to it. She gets her own settings, and it has that view. So we add that for that personalization. And then on the 2 gig product line, which is our security product line, we use it to be able to deactivate or disarm your security system. And so it's a really quick way for people to walk in. You got your arm full of packages or groceries, and you can walk in. You have to show your face, and you have to tilt it side to side because we got around anti-spoofing. You can't just hold up a picture of me and disarm the system. It requires you to tilt. It's looking for a 3D image. And so we're using it in that way today. But here's the promise, and here's where I see AI going. The smart home is fantastic. It's been around for a long time. I've been here for 20 years. It was there before I got here. And it's been this awesome experience where from a mobile device, certainly in the last 16 years, from touchscreens, from keypads, from on-screen navigators, using remote controls, I could control my home. And that's the key word, control. And the word smart home automation has been around for a long time, but there's been very little real automation. It's really been around control. And I can create programming that's cause and effect. I open the door and it's during this time of the day. I turn on these lights or I adjust the temperature. If it senses motion, do these things. Cause and effect programming. That's not really automation. And AI, I believe, where we'll see that go is into a world where we can start to truly automate and add the magic part of what these systems are for the consumer. And a house that can not only anticipate your needs because it's using that historical information about how do you use that space? How is it being used? And along with that, who is in that space? But in an unintrusive way that doesn't make it so that you're worried about, I've got inside cameras. No one wants inside cameras in their house. I don't. I don't know about you, but I certainly do not.
We do not.
Okay, that's good. It's pretty synonymous that people I talk to do not want cameras in their home. But being able to do that in a way that I can tell that Stacy's in the home, I can tell where Stacy's at in the home, and then learn the behaviors of what Stacy does in her home, and then provide you back with some ideas about, hey, I've noticed that this is your behavior in your house. Do you want me to automate those things for you? Rather than the house just taking control, because that's also that place where you start to then get out of control. Maybe Skylab is taking control at that point in time. But this is allowing the consumer to stay in control of their house. But those are homes that do 2 things. One, unleashes the magic of what your home is, because you can't even communicate that. If I wanted to bring in a CD dealer and I go, here are my habits. I go into this room between 5 and 5:30 and I turn on the lights and I want the temperature at 70 degrees and I like to listen to soft jazz at 30% audio, right? You can't communicate that. You're just not going to know. But if the home could know that, and because we can control all those things, bring that experience together for consumer, I think that unlocks the magic of what these consumers are investing in their home. But it also allows for that home to evolve over time. And that's also one of the things that plagues our industry, quite honestly, is the fact that they're very stationary. They're very static. Day one, when the installer, and our CDA dealers are fantastic. They will do a great job. They'll come in and get as much information from you as they can about your life and how you live it and how you want these rooms and this home to behave. And they'll do that for you. And on day one, it's great. 700 days later, though, it's not as great because your life changes. The way you use those spaces changes. The family makeup changes. People move out. People move back in, sometimes with extra kids when they come back. And that all changes how that home is being utilized. And unless you have your professional coming in every couple of weeks and you'd even have to remember those things to tell them what they needed to change, unless you're doing that, which doesn't happen, that home suddenly gets out of sync with you. Not suddenly, over time is out of sync with you. And this would allow for those homes to evolve with the consumer. And that's really where I see the magic of AI taking us.
Okay. And you're right. We've had a history, like Savant used to have a really cool feature, like I think it was only with their lighting, but if you got your lighting just right, you could snap a picture of it and it would be like, oh, I will save this forever. You didn't snap a little picture. You actually just told Savant, this is what I want. Call it this. It was great. Amazon has launched Hunches, which has a little bit of the learning. Like it sometimes Madame May will just pop up and be like, hey, you started your good night routine, but I noticed you now have a door lock. Do you want to add that in there? Do you want to lock your door tonight? I'm like, what up? Yeah, I do. So I feel like we're almost there. What sort of things do people in your position as the business owners need to consider when launching these products and services around AI? Because there is kind of a creepy line.
Yeah, privacy and security are the biggest things. And that's something that we take very personally because it's personal to us. And it's something that I think all business owners need to be thinking about. The last thing we want to do is expose somebody to additional security risk or privacy risk. That data in our mind needs to reside as much as possible on site and stay on site. Not be shared over the web, not be shared and to be in places, even though we'll take every precaution that, and I'm sure other companies will. We've all seen the data breaches that occur even with the most secure of systems that are out there today. And so privacy is the biggest concern that we've got. And that's why the data that we use needs to be obfuscated in our mind too. I need to know that it's not associated, it only gets personalized on site. But anything that's stored in the cloud should be obfuscated. I don't know it's Stacy's data. I just know it's data, and I just need to process it. Because in order for us to facilitate, and other manufacturers to facilitate the kind of processing we're talking about here, we're going to have to do some of it in the cloud. That's just the reality of what's going to have to happen. But if we obfuscate that data so that and even if you could get the data, it wouldn't tell you whose it is, where it belongs, or anything about it. It's really just calculations. But all of the personalization happens on site. And some of the better AI systems that I'm seeing thought through are thinking in that kind of vein. But I think that's the biggest concern that we have to face into today is really a privacy and security concern.
When you talk about obfuscating data, you may not be able to get very specific, but can you talk generally? Is this like just anonymizing my data? Or?
It is. And so it's sending data to be able to have it processed. And I need to get the result back from it. What I'm looking for is here's a set of data. I need to be able to store that data, then be able to run algorithms on that data to say, here's what the data shows me. And it's a pattern, right? I need to be able to identify patterns in this case and then provide back to me. This is what the data shows me is that pattern. And it shows me a pattern of data that's fairly anonymized at that point in time. And now I add the personalization to it because I know that was your data and I know that it was you and I can associate those two things together.
Okay. So generative AI could do personalization at scale in a way that is not hopefully scary for people if you do it correctly.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that people should take from this too. I'm not overly terrified with the world being taken over by AI. I think that the other part that I think is happening too, and thankfully I do agree that there needs to be regulation around how this is handled. And we are starting to see people talk about that. We're starting to see some things happen that way. So that we will be protected to some degree. But ultimately, as with anything, I think it relies on the consumer to do their research to make sure that what they're doing. I would suggest that today with everything you have. I think if people just said, instead of saying accept to everything that they get when they get a new EULA agreement, end user agreement license, they would read those. If they actually knew what was in them, they might be a little scared. But I think we've got to have those protections in place.
I feel like we should talk about the economy because a lot of the smart home stuff is really, it's expensive. It's a luxury. It's not what you need. And we're kind of going into, I'm going to go with iffy times. So we saw bankruptcy filings from Brinks last week. How do you see the economy affecting the business today?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And certainly you can look and see what's happening here. Build market. So if you look at new home starts, depending on what estimate you look at, it's either between 30 and 40% down this year from single family home starts, which is a significant downturn. If you look at MDUs, multifamily properties, it's actually up. And some of that's generational. We're seeing some of these people, especially early, generational folks want to be in these communities. They want to have these community services. They want to be part of something, and they're okay with not having a home that they own in some cases. Sometimes they'll own condos, but still want to be in this environment. But we've seen the multifamily grow. But with single family home down, it really affects a lot of the business. If you look at the smart home business, certainly the DIY sector hurt pretty heavily with that. It's an expense that you don't need to take on right now. The interest rate going up has a dramatic effect over the personal incomes of folks that are trying to afford these things. And so it's not bread or milk. It's not putting food on the table, and these things get sacrificed as part of that. Now, simultaneously though, the luxury market, and I'll find some wood to quickly knock on here. The luxury market, for the most part, stays fairly immune. If we look at the 2008, 2009 downturn that we had with the housing crisis, the luxury market stayed pretty strong. And that luxury market, people weren't buying new homes, but they were investing in their existing home. We're starting to see that thing happen right now. And we talked to our CEDIA dealers, a lot more of their business is being converted over to retrofit. So they're going into existing homes and either adding more product and services on top of it, or actually going in and adding products and service to the luxury homes that didn't have those technologies in the first place. And so we're starting to see that mix happen a lot like we said in 2008, 2009. But the luxury market stays strong. So that part of the segment is actually doing pretty well, performing very well today. And it's anticipated it will continue to be. And even that even goes into the new home starts that are there. If you break down what's down into, in the home housing sector as far as home starts, it's really those entry levels homes that are really having the biggest decline in them right now. So,
and anything about the lack of movement in houses for sale. So like a lot of people are like, ooh, I've got a great mortgage, I'm not moving. I don't know if that, because changing houses is a great time to invest in any sort of smart home tech.
It is. And that's certainly one of the other things. If you look at that part of what's happening as well. So new homes or just home sales, existing home sales is completely off the charts down as well. And that's another one of those things that drives people when they move into a new house. They go, hey, I want to put new smart home things into it or new technology into it. But there are parts of that are still growing, which is safety and security. And that happened down the last downturn as well. People then start to become way more concerned about protecting what they have, whether it's their family, their possessions. And so security sectors actually do pretty well in this downturn of economy as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Stacey, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so thanks everyone for listening to this week's Internet of Things podcast. I really appreciate it, as does Kevin. And if you want to find out more information on the Internet of Things, you can find it at my free weekly newsletter that comes out every Friday. You can sign up for that at www.staceyoniot.com/newsletter. Or you can just visit the website for all of those stories published a little bit later. Thanks for listening and have a great week.